Welcome back, everyone, to the Detroit Tigers franchise here on MLB The Show 18. So we are going to be doing the 2019 offseason today, or the Season 2 offseason, as we enter Season number 3. We ended up going 71-91 this year, which is 9 games better than our season last year. So I forgot to look at like the playoff MVPs and stuff. In the AL, Trey Mancini. In the NL, Wilson Contreras and Lonnie Chisenhall won World Series MVP. Great. As of course, the wild card Orioles did beat the 106-win juggernaut Chicago Cubs. So we will advance to the offseason. Our first base coach and third base coach contracts have expired. Okay. Qualifying offers. Let's start with retired players. So Dakota Hudson, who is a pretty talented prospect, ends up retiring due to a torn labrum he suffered towards the beginning of the season. Certainly a blow for the Tigers, but the Tigers do have a lot of really good pitchers in their farm system, and Hudson probably was not going to be in the long-term rotation, but it certainly is a shame. And K-Rod, at the age of 38, also retires. Some other notable players retiring. Sean Kelly, I don't know if that's notable. Bud Norris. Shane Green, former Detroit Tiger. Gordon Beckham, Edinson Volquez. Ryan Madsen. Hector Neris, Pat Neshek. And not too many good players. Rich Hill. Mark Melanson. That's a little bit surprising because he's still very good. Jeff Samardzija. And then free agency, I don't know if there's going to be anyone significant. Joaquin Benoit, Chris Coghlan, Alcides Escobar, Doug Fister, Adrian Gonzalez, Matt Harvey, Scott Kazmir, Joe Mauer. Maybe Joe Mauer will make the Hall of Fame, not entirely sure. But doesn't look like anyone too crazy. Hyunjin Ryu, Anibal Sanchez, Irvin Santana, Denard Span, Ruben Tejada, Scott Van Slyke, Adam Wainwright. That's somewhat big. Jason Worth, and of course, the one, the only Asher Wachachowski. That's a meme from like a year ago, if you remember that. Anyway, Adrian Beltre, I didn't even notice he retired. I must have totally missed that. He ends up making the Hall of Fame, very well deserved. He was a very good player throughout his time in the major leagues. 3,183 hits with almost 5,000 home runs. Excellent career from him. So, only one exclusive free agent negotiation. That is Melvin Upton Jr. And the Tigers do not plan on bringing back Melvin Upton. He will be going to free agent. With the first and third base coach spots open, the Tigers have gone after 60-year-old Chris McGraw to be the first base coach and Mark Hinch to be the third base coach. The Tigers will also be firing manager Joe Wilkerson. He's a pretty solid manager, but the Tigers would like to get someone better. The Tigers did show some interest in former LA Dodgers manager Dave Roberts and former LA Angels manager Mike Scioscia, but instead they have decided to go after 47-year-old Ken Riddick and are offering him a 3-year contract worth $21.2 million, which is just a little bit over $7 million per season. Mark Hinch and Ken Riddick did accept their contracts, but the original first base coach, I think his name was Chris McGraw, he did not accept, so instead the Tigers signed Paul Delgado, who isn't too bad of an alternative. 3 players are eligible for arbitration, that is Daniel Norris, Matt Shoemaker, and John Hicks. The only person the Tigers are giving arbitration is Daniel Norris, with the intention of the other 2 going in free agency. So at the tendering contract station, or whatever you call it, a lot of the top prospects are there, like Alex Faeda, Alejandro Alonso, Enrique Nunez, and the Tigers offered new contracts to pretty much everyone who they cared about, which is most of the players here. If it says on the bottom offer or interest level and it has an offer, then that means the Tigers did offer them, and then if not, then that means the Tigers didn't offer them, and they will become free agents. Now in free agency, we see a couple big names, most notably Nolan Arenado of the Colorado Rockies, a very good bat and a very good defensive player. Also, we see players like Xander Bogaerts, Garrett Cole, Jonathan Scope, Billy Hamilton, Yasiel Puig. So this isn't a great free agency class, but it is certainly not terrible, and I could see the Tigers going after a couple of players. Here's a look at the players who the Tigers offered contracts to in free agency. They did offer a contract to Xander Bogaerts, but did withdraw it. They were very tempted to offer a contract to Bogaerts, but decided to say no. So they offered a contract to Yasiel Puig, Dylan Betances, Starling Marte, Wellington Castillo, Mark Trumbo, Garrett Blackburn, and Jose Urena. The reason why they withdrew from Bogart's offer is because he had a qualifying offer. None of these players have a qualifying offer. As you see with the offer and interest level, you can see the contracts that the Tigers did offer them. So we'll spend a few days, see if any of them do accept the Tigers' contracts. Wellington Castillo goes to the Angels. The Tigers did offer him. Garrett Blackburn goes to the Yankees. That's actually pretty huge because he looked really good. But the Tigers do sign Yasiel Puig to a 2-year, $37.5 million deal. The Tigers didn't want to, completely go all out on Puig and give him, a 10-year deal. Nolan Arenado is leaving the Rocky Mountains and will be signing with the Cincinnati Reds. Zach Britton will be staying in Maryland, but will be switching teams. He goes from the World Series champion Orioles to the Washington Nationals. Dylan Betances was no longer interested in the Tigers' offer. The Tigers did try to renegotiate, but they weren't on the top, so instead they're going to be offering Will Harris, the former Houston Astro, a 1-year contract. He's coming off 2 phenomenal seasons. Actually, all 5 years in Houston, his highest ERA was 2.98. So he's been excellent with the Astros. The Tigers are hoping he can replicate that success in Detroit. And indeed, Will Harris is headed to Motown on a 1-year, $7.1 million contract in his 35-year-old season. It seemed like the Dodgers and the Mets were the main competition for Detroit with Dylan Betances, but Betances is actually going to sign with the Rangers. He's going to be making $7.1 million a season, just like Will Harris, but instead of a 1-year contract, it is a 3-year contract, as Betances is a little bit younger. Garrett Cole will be going north of the border to play with the Toronto Blue Jays on a 5-year, $90 million deal, as he's going to be making just about $18 million this season, so he certainly is getting a nice little payday. The speedster Billy Hamilton is going to get paid, and he's going to the Los Angeles Dodgers on a 5-year, $74.2 million, as the rich just keep getting richer. So the Tigers have agreed to trade Miguel Cabrera to the A's for Emilio Pagan. Certainly bittersweet, as Miguel Cabrera is a Detroit Tigers legend, and the Tigers would love to bring him back, but on a cheaper contract. Miguel Cabrera was not willing to take a pay cut, so the Tigers are going to be trading him to the Oakland Athletics for Emilio Pagan. Obviously, Prime Miggy is not worth Emilio Pagan. Prime Miggy did so much for this Tigers team, and even this past year, he was an all-star. But the Tigers, they want money. They don't have a lot of cap space with the signing of Yasiel Puig, so they have to make a sacrifice that they really don't want to make, and that is trading their longtime franchise icon, Miguel Cabrera. Xander Bogaerts has agreed to sign with the Diamondbacks. The main reason why the Tigers did trade Miguel Cabrera was because they wanted to get Xander Bogaerts because he no longer had a qualifying offer. He was just qualified since we're somewhat late into free agency. However, he is going to Arizona to join the Diamondbacks on a 5-year, $105 million deal. We are now at the Rule 5 draft. You must have less than 40 players to participate. I guess that's why the Tigers did not get a Rule 5 draft pick last year, because they had 40 players exactly. The Tigers now have 39 players on their 40-man roster, as they did remove relief pitcher Rufus Nguyen. So that means they will get a pick, and they will be getting the 11th pick, which is the same pick they'll be getting in the MLB draft, and they do get to pick. With their Rule 5 selection, they will be taking Eric Fede from the Washington Nationals organization, 27 years old. He's still in the top 50 prospects, which kind of baffles me since he is already 27. But the Tigers will draft him. He must stay on the Major League roster. And yeah, the actual offseason has concluded, and we are now at spring training. The Tigers do look a little different and no longer have Miguel Cabrera, but they're probably not done making moves. I expect this team to make a trade. As I sort of just predicted, the Tigers are going to be making a trade, and it's a big one. They're going to be sending Daniel Norris, who's solid and he's young, but he hasn't really played that well for them the past couple seasons. Eric Fede, who they drafted in the Rule 5 draft, they don't really see a future spot for him. And Will Harris. They did not want to trade Will Harris But to do this trade, they have to the Houston Astros for George Springer. The reason why the Astros are doing this is they're getting more pitching depth, and they need pitchers. They only have 4 guys that they like in their rotation, and with the loss of Will Harris, they need some bullpen help, so they'd be glad to get Will Harris back. George Springer's on the last year of his contract, and the Astros have some other capable outfielders like Josh Reddick, Kyle Tucker, and Joe Adell. So George Springer will be headed to the Detroit Tigers. The outfield was one of the Tigers' biggest weaknesses, and this offseason they've added Yasiel Puig and George Springer. The Tigers will be making another trade. They're going to be sending 21-year-old second baseman Neil McCain, who is really good, and he would probably play in the majors this season, but they think this trade is worth it. They're also going to be trading Yu-Chang Chang, who has been a starter the past couple of seasons. Okay, he barely played in 2018, but he was a starter pretty much all of last season, as well as outfield prospect Julio Rodriguez, who is the main piece in the Nelson Cruz trade at last year's trade deadline, to the St. Louis Cardinals for shortstop Paul DeJong. DeJong has an excellent bat, and he is on a great contract. He's going to be making less than $4 million a year for the next 7 years, which is the main reason why the Tigers did this trade. DeJong can also play every infield position, which means he can play second, where McCain would play, and Fernando Tatis can also play second base anyway. So the Tigers have added Yasiel Puig, George Springer, and Paul DeJong to their lineup. That's pretty good. With trading away Will Harris, the Tigers need some bullpen help, so they're going to go to Pittsburgh and offer a deal for Felipe Rivero, a relief pitcher. He's also on a very good contract, making $2.3 million for the next 4 years. The Tigers will also be receiving outfield prospects Lolo Sanchez in the deal, as they will be trading starting pitcher James Hu. He's 21 years old. He'd probably be in AAA. He is a lefty. He is pretty good. Christian Stewart, who was a starter last year, as well as Joel Lugo, a talented third base prospect, to the Pittsburgh Pirates for Rivero and Sanchez. And the Tigers will be doing another trade with Pittsburgh, as they're going to be getting third base prospect Joel Lugo back, who they just used in the Felipe Rivero trade, by trading away Troy Stokes Jr., Gerson Moreno, and Ronnie Rodriguez. We'll look at the lineups in a second, but I want to talk about what the Tigers did. The Tigers decided to end their rebuild, which I think was a good idea because they had plenty of young assets who were about to blossom into superstars, so the Tigers are not rebuilding anymore, and they showed that in the offseason by acquiring Yasiel Puig, George Springer, Paul DeJong, and Felipe Rivero. Let's look at the lineups and the pitching rotation. Before we look at the lineups, we're going to look at the top 50 prospects. Vladimir Guerrero is at number 1, and most of these guys are going to be starting out in the majors. We have 4, which is Alejandro Alonso at number 4, Vaughn Crosby at 14, Enrique Nunez at 16, Alex Faedo at 19. Actually, we have 5. Adam Isaac is at 39, and yeah, that's it. Here is a look at the lineups for the Tigers. We're not going to show non-DH lineups just because they don't really matter. The right-handed lineup will be George Springer, Alejandro Alonso, Paul DeJong, Bobby Bradley, Yasiel Puig, Jeimer Candelario, Fernando Tatis, Enrique Nunez, and Jake Rogers. And the left-handed lineup will be Fernando Tatis, Paul DeJong, George Springer, Yasiel Puig, Enrique Nunez, Bobby Bradley, Alejandro Alonso, Jeimer Candelario, and Jake Rogers. So the exact same 9 players in both lineups. The bench batters will be Nico Goodrum, Victor Reyes, and Prince Fielder. Prince Fielder has come out of retirement. Even though he retired because of a pretty serious injury, doctors have cleared him. He's come out of retirement, and he's going to be returning to the Tigers. The team he was on for just 2 seasons, but very good in those 2 seasons. The rotation will be Michael Fulmer, Franklin Perez, Alex Faedo, Matt Manning, and Luis Medina. All 5 of these players have a chance to be the long-term rotation, but there is Vaughn Crosby as well, so that's 6 players. So one of these 5 will not be in the long-term rotation, but this is the core of the pitching unit for the future. These 5: Fulmer, Perez, Faedo, Manning, and Medina. Felipe Rivero will be the closer. Jordan Hicks and Emilio Pagan will be the setup guys. And Alvaro Reyes, Alex Wilson, Joe Jimenez, and Darrell Hayes will be middle relievers, and Brad Keller will be the long reliever.